Texas A&M has a bunch of transfers getting a lot of attention, but we're not talking enough about Trey Jones.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today, we're going to talk about 5 transfers that I think are going to have an impact for the Aggies this season that we aren't talking enough about. You know, I alluded to it, getting rocking and rolling here, and my number one guy is the former Central Michigan safety, Trey Jones. He's just a player, and it's funny, we have discussed the secondary time and time again. And I think that when it comes to the transfers, we know that Bryce Anderson's making the move back to safety, which is something Coach Elko said, listen, hey, I recruited this guy to be a safety. He's going to play safety. We recruited him to be a safety. So, you know, but you need another safety. And you have a handful of guys. Obviously, Dericky Wright is making the move back to Vandy. And so now you need another guy. You've got some young guys. You've got some of the freshmen. You've got some other transfers. You've got Ratcliffe, who I really like. And then you got Trey Jones. And I think that Ratcliffe and Trey Jones really might duke it out for this role. And I think that a lot of people are leaning Marcus Ratcliffe early, which isn't the worst take in the world. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I like Marcus Ratcliffe a lot. I'm simply saying I think that Trey Jones has a better chance to win this job than many people are giving him credit for. And let's say, and so, you know, the point of this conversation is to talk about players who will have an impact, transfers that we haven't talked a ton about that will have an impact. And I think Trey Jones is going to have an impact. And so what I mean by this is that doesn't just mean starting snaps. If I still think he plays an impact regardless of if it's as a starter, I think Trey Jones can play an impact if someone gets banged up. I think there are a ton of different ways that Trey Jones can have an impact on this football team. So I think he's a player that we aren't quite talking enough about. I think he's a really solid addition to this team. I think he makes the Aggies better. I think he makes the Aggies deeper. And I just think he's a player who isn't going to be afraid to come in and compete for a role and help this football team. And I think that if Ratcliffe does win the job and it's Bryce Anderson and Ratcliffe, I think that, I think that Jones might be next guy up to where you're an injury away from him being the dude. And once again, we sit here and talk about how it's just college football. Players are going to get banged up all the time. So a player like Trey Jones is the perfect guy to have to come off your bench who's played some college football at a high level. The next guy I have here is Soloman Deshields, the former Pitt transfer. Now, I am sold on Scooby Williams. I think he's the guy. Somebody was commenting the other day saying that they're not totally in on Scooby Williams, which is fair, made some valid arguments, but I just think that he had a solid spring. I think that he's done some things well during his college football career thus far. He's played in the SEC, has that experience. Obviously, he's not perfect. He is a player that is going to need to have been developed, but I think that that's going to happen. I think that he's going to be fine. But I think that Soloman Deshields is going to be a dude for this team. Once again, some of these other guys I'm going to run through, I think, have starting upside. I don't know if I'm there with Soloman Deshields. I like him a lot. I like the upside he brings. I like the experience he brings. I like everything he brings to this roster. I just have a feeling that Scooby Williams is going to be the guy for this football team. But the thing here is when Alex Howard decided to hit the portal, you needed another guy at linebacker. You had to go get somebody. And this was the perfect addition to your team. This is a guy who can help you right now. He genuinely can be a huge help to this football team. I mean, he could win this starting job, and I wouldn't be crazy surprised if he ended up being the starting linebacker for the Aggies. I would not be like, oh, crazy out of this world surprised. So, he's a guy that I think is going to have an impact for this team, whether it's as a starter, whether it's the next man up off the bench. I think that he's a guy, and he's a recent commit about a month ago, so obviously we haven't had a ton of time to talk about him, but I don't think he's being discussed enough, and I think his importance and his value to this team is so, it's just through the roof important because you needed more depth, and he's a solid depth piece. We got to a point in the portal where I went, man, it looks like you might just have to pull some random linebacker and hope he can help you. I really think Soloman Deshields truly can help you. I think he is a terrific depth addition to this roster, and the chance that I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't end up starting. The next guy I have, and this is one I think others might be talking more about him than I am because I'm so high on another player at this position, but it's Trey Watson. I think that, once again, I think this is a guy that maybe it's more me than others, but because I'm so sold on Donovan Green. But Donovan Green, once again, is coming back from an ACL tear. We see this all the time. Players maybe aren't as explosive, aren't able to cut as quickly as well. So Trey Watson, the transfer tight end, is a guy who I think has a ton of upside in the receiving game. I think blocking-wise, his PFF grades weren't as elite as a transfer like Garrett Miller, but they were still serviceable. And I think of the transfer tight ends, I think he is the best pass catcher. I think he has the most upside there. And once again, I cannot reiterate this enough. Colin Klein loves to use tight ends. He is going to use them all the time. You need a ton of them. You need a ton that can play. You need a ton of guys that are healthy. So, and it's problematic because I love Jaden Platt as well. I love Platt. I love Green. And I like Watson. I think you've got 3 tight ends that can all get the job done, which is a good problem to have, especially in an offense where your coordinator loves to use tight ends. But someone has to separate themselves as the guy. And I think Watson might end up being the tight end too. But, here's the deal. I'll call a spade a spade. If Donovan Green comes out there and he's not cutting like we need, and he's not healthy, and he's not 100% back to being Donovan Green, I think Watson could have a huge role for this team. So those are the first 3 guys. I got 2 more. The next one, I think I might be talking more about this player than others, but I can't stop talking about him, and it's Rodas Johnson, the former Wisconsin defensive lineman. He brings so much versatility to this defensive line room. He's just a player that he can play all over. He has a skill set to play a handful of positions of defensive line. He's not going to be a guy that has 7 sacks. He's not going to be a guy that gets 6 tackles a game. He's not going to be a stat sheet warrior. He's going to be one of those guys that just battles in the trenches and helps your team out in ways that you might not see on paper, but if you really watch the game close, you will see it. And I think he's got the makings to be that type of player. So, and those types of players are so valuable to a football team. You have to have them. You have to have the guys who their role is so much more important in reality than it looks on paper. The last guy I have here, and this is the guy who I think is a legitimate likely starter, but is Armaj Reed-Adams, the former Kansas interior offensive lineman, who I think has a good chance to start at one of the guard positions for the Aggies. I haven't heard a lot about him, but half from the coaching staff, and all I've heard is continuous great things. This kid's really good. This kid's really good. He might start. He's really good. We like him. And I don't think we're hearing enough people talk about him. I think he's a player that I'd lean toward him starting, and I think he's going to be really serviceable. I think he's going to be a solid guard. He plays some college football, strong kid, great frame. I think that he's an offensive lineman that is going to makes this roster a lot better. gives you some experience, and I don't think we've talked enough about him. So that's my last guy. Those are 5 transfers. Yes, listen, we'll talk a ton about Nic Scourton. We'll talk a ton about Cyrus Allen and Cassius Howell and all these other names in the portal. Will Lee, Des Rick, sure. But some of these guys that I just discussed aren't going to be brought up as much as those guys, but they will have a ton of value for the Aggies this season. Speaking of Nic Scourton, he's going to get a lot of attention from fellow SEC opponents in every game the Aggies play this year. What does this mean? Could this open things up for other players? We'll run through that conversation coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So I had someone comment and talk about this a couple days ago with Nic Scourton, and I think it's a really solid point. So Nic Scourton is going to be one of the best pass rushers, if not the best pass rusher in the SEC this season. I think he's going to be really, really good. I don't need to keep sitting here talking about it. It was funny in our crossover that I did with Locked On Auburn host Zach Blackerby. He was talking about he kept trying to dunk on me for all the players, former A&M players that are now with the Auburn Tigers, and missing on Keandre Lambert-Smith, and but he kept joking and saying, he's just Cam Coleman. He wakes up excited about Cam Coleman. And I said, listen, I wake up excited about Nic Scourton. Come on. And it's true. I think he's going to be a dominant force in the SEC, but I also think he is going to, garner a lot of attention, a lot of players, a lot of opposing offenses going, okay, listen, you cannot let that kid beat you. So why is this important? I think it might open up some opportunities for your other players on the defensive line, maybe even your linebackers, to get pressure on the quarterback. Now, with Nic Scourton coming off, defensive end coming off the edge, coming off the outside, you're going to see him get chipped some by the tight end, and you're going to see defensive or the tackles, try and set hard, set early to make sure that he can't beat you with the speed rush, to make sure he can't beat you like that. And, that's definitely an interesting thing to pay attention to here. I think that you're going to see he's going to be the priority on this defense when it comes to game planning. The number one player circled on opposing teams' charts of who you need to watch, who we're preparing for, scouting reports, is going to be Nic Scourton. I really don't think there's any kind of debate there. I think that he is going to be the player that has opposing offensive coordinators shaking in their boots a little bit, concerned about, okay, we can't let this guy sack our quarterback 3 times on third down. Can't let it happen. We can't let him have a strip sack that leads to a 32-yard touchdown fumble recovery for Terry York. Can't let it happen. And I think that that's going to be a priority for these opposing teams. So I think that's going to open the window for Shamar Turner, for DJ Hicks, for Otis Johnson, Malik Silla, for Albert Regis, and I White, GBD, Shamar Stewart. It's going to open up the window for these guys. you got a couple players on the defensive line, a couple players I was listed who were a little banged up during spring, but I believe this unit's going to be healthy and ready to rock and roll for the start of the season. So, and I think this is where we're going to find out how good Nic Scourton can be. If, here's the deal. Watch an NFL game, obviously, the good players are getting double teamed. It's what happens. The good receivers are able to get open on double teams. Cooper Kupp before last year. Devontae Adams is the king of getting open on double teams. I mean, he's just such a great route runner. Those are the players. Usually the elite route runners are who are able to beat double teams. And I think the players with elite pass rush moves are who can beat double teams and beat chips when it comes to the offensive line. And once again, they're always going to have a tight end on Nic Scourton's side. They're going to make sure that they can chip them. They're going to make sure if they're able to double team them, they will double team them. Sometimes they might not be able to. And that's the goal too. You want to talk about the flip side of this argument. Okay, sure. Let's hope that the rest of your defensive line, which I believe this is reality, is good enough that even if you want to put all your attention on Nic Scourton, it won't matter because just someone else is going to kill you. I mean, that's just the reality here. I think that you have a good enough defensive line room, a deep enough room. I mean, like, how many names do I have listed here except for Scourton? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 names listed. I didn't write down Cassius Howell, which was an accident. So, I mean, you've got, and there's probably 3 or 4 more guys that we're not even talking about. I mean, once again, I know you lose Walter Nolan. I know you lose, why am I blanking on? Fidel Diggs? Gosh, I always blank on people's names for a few seconds. You lose Jackson to the Bengals, the NFL. You lose talent along this defensive line, but then all that means is some of the young guys, the guys that were freshmen and sophomores last season, like a DJ Hicks, it gives them opportunities to step into a larger role and be the guy. That's how college football works. Your good players leave, your players that you recruited to be good behind them or have to be good behind them. And I think the Aggies have a ton of guys like that. So I think that even if opposing offenses want to put a ton of attention on Nic Scourton, which they will, I just have this feeling that you're not going to be able to do that with how good the rest of this defensive line is going to be. And even the linebackers are going to be getting to the quarterback. So yes, they're going to want to put pressure on Nic Scourton and to make it harder on him to get in the backfield, make it harder on him to make an impact in the game. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter as much as some might think because of how good the rest of these players are. So let me know these couple of things in the YouTube comments. I want to hear y'all's thoughts on this. How many sacks do you think Nic Scourton has? How much attention do you think opposing offenses are going to give him when it comes to making a game plan? And then do you believe that will open up opportunities for other defensive linemen to get to the backfield, to get tackles for loss, sacks? How do y'all think that plays out? It's SEC baseball tournament time. Y'all are waking up. It's Wednesday. The Aggies play today. We're going to talk about who they play. We're going to talk about thoughts on this game, thoughts on the SEC tournament, and where this team stands as the postseason is here. We'll have all those conversations coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. So, last night, the Mississippi State Bulldogs were able to walk off Ole Miss. Sounds like this was a huge win for Mississippi State when it comes to their chances of hosting, being the 14, 15, 16, whatever, when it comes to hosting a regional. So it sounds like it was a big win for the Bulldogs, which we'll take it because you want as many SEC hosts as possible just because you want the SEC to do well. And I think that you're going to see a really good ball game between these two clubs. You saw Mississippi State and Texas A&M already face off this season. The Aggies, of course, took that series. But listen, once again, we're talking about a team that is getting ready to host a regional. This is one of the 16 best teams in college baseball. because, once again, they're an SEC team. Even the teams that weren't good in the SEC are better than many of the teams you're going to play in the postseason. That's just reality. I mean, like the team, this is the reality here. I'm such an SEC guy when it comes to baseball. I'm a believer that even if you bring, the only team I would say this isn't true for is probably Missouri. I think if you bring some of these teams, you bring Ole Miss, you bring Florida, who had a really rough season compared to expectations, maybe even in Auburn, I think they could seriously go and win some regionals like that. That's my opinion on the SEC. So, but you're getting ready to play Mississippi State. It's going to be really interesting to see how. I haven't seen anywhere who is starting. Let me go ahead and double check. I'm recording this in the morning, so this game's here in a few hours. I want to go ahead and make sure that a starter hasn't been announced. Yeah, it doesn't. A starter has not been announced. Do you go with Prager? Let me go through this tournament preview here and see if they plan to start Prager, because I don't really know what your plan is. I think that you got to remember this. This team is not concerned about the SEC tournament. Let's just be honest. I mean, it's great if you go win this thing. It's awesome. It's exciting. It's fun. It's all true. But at the end of the day, I don't think the world is going to, it doesn't matter if you win or lose this. If you're a Texas A&M baseball player, a fan, a coach, your eyes are on a much more significant prize. But so my concern here is pitching. You don't want to waste pitching. Now, regionals start on the 31st, which means if Prager were to pitch today, he would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days until his next start. If you want to do it, do it. If you want to start, throw your guys, throw them. I mean, I don't think you need to play in this. You can't just pretend it's not a thing and be like, well, whatever. I just don't think you can do that. You need to play in this. You need to put some serious effort into it. And I think they're going to do that. So while a starter hasn't been announced yet, I do think you're going to see them throw their guys in this tournament. It wouldn't make any sense to not do it. So if it's Prager, if it's someone else, I won't be crazy surprised. I'm a little the reason that I'm sitting here going, well, is it going to be Prager? Is because they haven't announced it yet. It's like, normally they announce before a series. You figure in, once again, they haven't posted it here. I went and read and looked, and I'm not seeing it anywhere. But if I had to guess, I'd say Prager throws. But I think it would make the most sense to throw him today. And now, listen, if you make it deep in this SEC tournament, I don't believe you're going to throw Prager again, because you won't want him pitching in a regional on 5 days rest. You're going to want him throwing on 7 to 9 days rest. So it'll be interesting to see who throws, who starts for the Aggies. But I don't think they're going there to lose. I don't think they're going to Hoover to lose. I think that they're going there with the realization that they have much more significant goals than winning the SEC tournament. But I don't think this team's going there to lose. So it'll be something really interesting to pay attention to. So I'm excited about it. This game's it's listed as to be determined. Hopefully around 4:30ish, you'll see this game played at some point. But no, excuse me. It's 30 minutes after Game 7, which is at 4:30. So probably, and you know how it goes in the SEC tournament. This thing could be played at 8. This thing could be played at midnight. It's going to go one way or another. But I'm excited to watch these ball games. But yeah, I mean, don't waste anything. Don't throw any pitching away. Don't do anything like that. Your regionals starts on the 31st. Selection shows on the 27th. We need to be ready to rock and roll for the postseason. That really does matter. So yes, while I do believe they show up to this and they put in a serious effort, the goal is much more important than winning the SEC tournament. Let me know y'all's thoughts on the SEC tournament. What do you think? Who's going to start today? Let me know in the YouTube comments. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank y'all so much for being here every single day. I really do appreciate it. I hope everybody has an outstanding rest of their day today, and we will see you tomorrow.